professor in IMT Ghaziabad and looking after the BIFS course in the IMT Ghaziabad. He is leading the team which is looking after the banking and financial services program in IMT Ghaziabad. Earlier, he was the general manager in Bank of Baroda. He is a veteran, long experience, and he is dealing with this subject for past few years and delivering this particular program to senior executives in various public sector and private sector banks. Professor Mahajan, now you can start.
Thank you very much, sir, for all the good words which you have said. And I welcome all the participants on this webinar. Last week, we have Mr. Shubhendu Motra with us, and who had touched the early signals as far as the stress is concerned in the corporates. So today, I'll be extending where we have left last week, and today's discussion will be more at the policy level, and I will be sharing with you certain historical data, and from there we will see that where we are in between in the history, what went wrong, why the Indian banking could not do well as far as the recovery mechanism is concerned, what steps in last 6 to 7 years the system, industry, as well as the regulators they have taken, and in between what the developments have taken place. So I will be going through a PPT, and with a request, as and when you require, you can note down your questions. At the end of the session, we'll be taking up all the questions one by one. And I will be also requesting all of you to strengthen this subject by contributing your experience in this area. So is the screen visible? Is the screen visible?
Yeah.
It is all right.
Right.
It is visible.
Yes, sir.
So moving forward, I will be discussing broadly on 4 topics. One will be the overview. Second, what are the causes? Third, the monitoring mechanism. More or less, most of the things at the micro level we have touched last week, but few things which require to be continuously followed up, that will be touched in this section. And last, about the resolution and the recent guidelines of Reserve Bank of India. So the very first will be about the overview. I will be starting with the statement made by Dr. Raghuram Rajan on September 4, 2013, when he took over the governorship of Reserve Bank of India. And in that statement, he mentioned finance is not about lending. It is about recovery of loans also. It was a very powerful statement. And in that also, he has mentioned we have to improve the efficiency of the recovery system, especially at the time of economic uncertainty like the present. All of you, those who have been in the system at that point of time may be knowing that was a very tough period as far as the banking and the financial system in India is concerned. And at that point of time, in case if you see the statement, it was basically not a simple statement. It was basically a reaction on the system by the governor at the time of taking over the charge. And in case if I simplify this statement in various demystifying, so why there was a need for the statement? Recovery is also important as the lending, identification of stress asset in portfolio, how to improve the efficiency of the recovery system. That was the few things which we were struggling at that point of time. And in case to understand this statement, and in case to understand all these aspects, we have to go back to the history and almost about 2 decades. And then we will come to some conclusions, and then we will see whatever has been done in last 5 to 6 years, whether that is sufficient, whether we are moving in a right direction, or whether enough has to be done in the times to come. So if we are looking to the history, in early 90s, reform came in the banking industry and in the financial system as per the Narasimham Committee 1. And these reforms were aimed at ensuring safety and soundness of the banking system, imparting greater transparency and accountability, protecting interest of customers, introducing global best practices, allowing market forces to decide rates. So we started almost from the scratch, because that was the time when the banking system was totally protected, particularly on the asset side. There was no freedom for the banks to decide the interest rates. There was no freedom to the banks to float their own products in the market. On the name of the financial systems, there were 3 leading financial institutions, those who were involved in the term lending, and they were IFCI, IDBI, and ICICI. As far as the scheduled commercial banks were concerned, they were all involved in the working capital at that point of time. And that is something, a sort of 95, 96 we are talking about. So from there, now almost at 25 years of the journey, how we have covered and how we have been able to manage, and whether it was a apathetic attitude of the system towards the recovery, or we were very bullish and all the times the focus was on the lending. I feel that was what was in the mind of the governor when he made the first statement immediately after taking the charge of the RBI. So let me go through the historical data, and in the historical data which I have drawn, you will find there is a data of almost 25 years of 2 decades, and this is a sufficient data to judge any system and how the system has been moving, how the up and downs are coming, and how the cycle in the system is performing. It is a perfect cycle which is forming for almost for 20 years, starting from 1996. And when we will see the data of 2016, and we will realize that there is a full cycle in 20 years. This bar may look much below than this bar of 16, but here I want to just share with you, at this point of time in 1996, the whole banking was dominated by the private sector bank. New private banks, they came into existence by way of the HDFC, ICICI, and other banks during that period only. And at that point of time, they were not having any stress assets or the NPAs with them. So as such, this data is that of the whole public sector banks. So when we will be looking to separately the 2016 situation, we will find as of now also the public sector banks, they are almost at the same stage in 16 and the 17, almost at the same stage. And this is basically because of the aggregate due to the low NPA or the stress assets of the private sector and the foreign banks. So I want to divide this whole cycle in 3 parts. First cycle start from 1996, and it is coming up to 2004, and then there has been a sustainable position up to 2012, and this was a golden era in the Indian banking history as well as in the economy of the Indian banking. But this was the period when there was a lot of recession, and then with the opening of the banking system and a lot of new banks were coming along with the technology and very exotic products, both in the corporate as well as in the retail sector. So gradually there was a growth in the credit sector. So with this growth, we could come to the 2004, and a very radical change has taken place here when in the retail sector space, the introduction of the SARFAESI norm was introduced. With the introduction of the SARFAESI norm, then the market and particularly the public sector banks, they become very bullish in the retail segment space, and as such, the public at large and the customers, they were having the capacity to spend, and from here onward, the economy was driven by the retail sector, and then it was also supplementing the expansion of the corporate sector. During this period, 2004 to 2010, continuously the GDP was showing the growth rate of 8%, and it was predicted. I am having the data from the IMF, from the World Bank, from very many renowned economists, that in case if India can improve their supply side, the demand during this period in 9 and 10 was such that it can sustain this growth in next 10 years also up to 2020. I am having the data, and this all data was proving that we are having the potential, demand is there, but basically because of the infrastructure, weak infrastructure, because of the logistics, because of the commercial real estate, because of the power sector, since all these sectors, they were lacking in the infrastructure as well as in the capacity. So India, in case if they are focusing more on the infrastructure, they can sustain this growth for next 10 years also. So from 2007 and 2008, lot of infrastructure projects, they started coming in. And in this era, lot of road projects, lot of power projects, lot of ports, new emerging sectors like aviation, airports, ports, and then commercial real estate. They were lot of companies, they came and built their capacities in this field. So whenever we were planning for the future expansion, we were keeping this thing in mind that now the economy will be driven by the infrastructure segment. So up to 2010 and 11, absolutely there was no issue. But what was lacking during this period, that the way we were expanding, I will be sharing with you in the following slides, what was the growth rate of the credit during this period. Growth rate during this period of the industry, credit growth of the industry was almost 20% plus. And in this space, public sector growth was more than 20%. Certain banks, they were growing 3 to 4% more than the industry level. So in certain cases, they were growing at the rate of 20, 23, 24% also. So this type of the growth, this economy has seen, this economy could absorb that growth also. But after 2012, all of a sudden, with the certain decisions at the macro level, like 2G scam and the coal scam, they came into existence. And due to that, very negative sentiments, they developed in the system, and lot of assets, they were acquired by the banks, which were not having much life, and just for the purpose of showing the growth, that was taken into their books. So that was also one of the reasons. That means we will be discussing the various reasons in the following slides also. And thereafter 2013 and up to 2020, it is a history. What I shared in the first slide of the statement of Governor Dr. Raghuram Rajan, that was in the September 2013, and that was the time when the system started taking the heat of, feeling the heat of the impaired assets in a very big way, and they were not ready at that point of time how to resolve this issue. The only mechanism which was in existence at that point of time was the corporate debt restructuring, CDR. And apart from that, there was not, and that was also not having much legal bonding. During this period and before that, on the name of the law and the legal system, there was only one law, and which was SICA, Sikh Industrial Companies Act, which came into existence sometime in 86 or 87, if I recollect properly. And then there was BIFAR was the board which was deciding about the viability of the various Sikh companies, and then they were deciding that how the resolution will be done. But at that point of time also, lenders were not having any preference in this area. So moving forward, let me see that basically what we mean by the stress assets. I think the normal perception with many of us is that it is the NPA or the restructured. And I slightly differ with this view. Basically, I feel that even if any account which is standard, and though the recovery may be coming in time or there is a delay in the recovery, but in case if he is showing some sign of sickness, which we can feel from day-to-day operations or otherwise from the market intelligence, that also should be considered as a stress asset. And apart from that, all the new projects which came into existence, we have seen and we have discussed in the last week also, because of the various reasons, there was certain issues and there was unordinary delay due to the particularly in the cases of the road projects, and commencement of the production could not take place, and due to that there were many reasons. So moving forward, we see what is the position in the recent 3-4 years. In the recent 3-4 years, in case we see, as I have told you, in the public sector banks, as of March 2018, they were touching 16. What was in 1996, same situation which we have seen in the case of the public sector banks, almost 16% gross NPAs, they were there. So in 20 years, we came back to the same situation where we were there in the 1996. From there, the things started improving in last 2 years, March 19 and March 20. There has been a significant, I should say 3 to 4% recovery is not a small amount and not a small percentage. So it came to this, but now again, from March, what we are facing as a COVID-19 stress, so where it will lead, it is anybody's guess. But during this period, the public sector, private sector banks and foreign banks, they have done exceptionally good. Maybe possible they are working in a very limited space, and due to that, the all scheduled commercial banks, they are right now are at 9.3%, whereas they were something around 12% when in March 18. So this is basically proving that there is a cyclic behavior as far as the quality of the asset in the Indian banking industry is concerned. So let me move forward and let me see that what is projected as per the Reserve Bank of India Financial Stability Report, which last came in December 2019, and it is already due as far as the June is concerned, but by this time they always come, and it may be possible because of this situation, and they have not come out with. So they have predicted something, the scheduled commercial banks, from 10.5. So this is basically from from September 19, 9.3, they are predicting 10.5. But what will be the exact situation? Since there are certain relief from the Reserve Bank of India, and since March, nobody is showing the NPA and the gross NPA because the moratoriums are allowed. So maybe possible this by figure, it may be remain this, but I feel that at least this figure, in case in reality, if we look for the performance of the system and the industries, it may go up to 15% also. This is anybody's guess. Nobody can say with the certainty what is going to be happening in the near future. Now, the very next point is about the NBFCs. NBFC sector, which is constituting something about 50% of what the commercial banks they are doing. As of now, the total credit extended by the scheduled commercial banks in the system is 1 lakh crore rupees, 102 lakh crore of rupees, which is almost 50% of the GDP of India. And this NBFCs, they are having something about 74 lakh crore of rupees, which is almost 25% of the GDP. So both put together scheduled commercial banks and the NBFCs, they are contributing 75% of the GDP. So this is basically the strength which the system is having, and all the efforts should be to strengthen this system so that as much as possible, the less impairment should happen in the quality of the assets. So very important aspect when we are going to the causes, that there is a perfect correlation between the GDP growth versus credit growth, or there is no correlation. I have come across certain studies, and per my experience also, what we have seen, whenever the GDP is growing, credit growth is there almost 2 to 2.5 times. So that means in case during 2004 to 2010, when the GDP growth rate was 8%, at the on average, credit was also growing at the rate of 20%. So this is basically the few studies. One is by the CEIC and other is by ICICI Bank. And these are the studies which is in the normal times when the GDP is growing. I don't feel that these equations and this correlation is existing right now, because in the following slides, I have few relation between the way the credit is growing and where the NPA is growing. NPA is growing much more than the credit. So this is the credit outstanding during 2008 to 2012. Why I am insisting on this issue, I come to one point which is very, very relevant, and which should be a point should be in the mind of all the policymakers, all the senior bankers. In 2008, the total credit of public sector banks was something about 17 lakh crore of rupees, and the scheduled commercial bank was something about 23 lakh crore of rupees. By 2012, that is within the period of 5 years, this amount was doubled. That means almost near to 50, almost I think 48 lakh crore of rupees was the scheduled commercial bank, and out of that the public sector banks, they were having something about 38 lakh crore of rupees, from the 17 lakh to 38 lakh crore of rupees. And this is the aggression which was shown during this period in this 5 years when the economy was at the top, was expanding very rapidly. So what it leads to? It leads to that whether the economy at that point of time in position to absorb this rapid growth, or whether was it a herd behavior, or whether it was a cognitive dissonance, or whether it was a disaster morphia. It was mixture of all the three. Because I have seen many public sector banks, many even private sector banks, they were following the herd behavior. If State Bank of India can do, why we cannot do? If the Bank of Baroda can do, why we cannot do? If they can lend 500 crore of rupees, why we cannot the 50? Nobody was basically having its own assessment about the business, about the borrower, about the credit. Since one bank has done, and this was basically fully exploited by the many syndicating companies, by many loan arrangers, and they were taking the sanctions from one big bank, and with that sanctions they were moving around with everyone, and then they were going for the financial closure of the project, and thereafter they were selling in the market at a very higher rate. So in case if we have grown 100% in 5 years, the second question which come to my mind during that period, whether credit monitoring system was also strengthened accordingly? No, it was not. Nobody, it was totally apathetic on the part of the system, that no efforts were done to do the credit monitoring, and rather I will say we were not even aware what and how the monitoring has to be done. Whenever any account was coming under stress, it was referred to the CDR system, and in the CDR system all the efforts were there how this account can be kept as a standard account, so that there should not be any provisioning. All this thing was going on up to 11, 12, 13 and 14. So thereafter the turnaround has taken place, And with this turnaround, you will see a segment of the banking, which is the public sector, which was showing a growth of 25%, which was 4 and 5% more than the industry level. They came down to, in March 17, 0.5, and whereas the system was having 4.4 growth. So in the downturn, basically those who at the peak, they are having a very aggressive approach. Whenever they are coming in the downturn, the basically story is totally reversed. So these are the stories. And in case if we see, thereafter also the very gradual now the growth is taking place in the space of the public sector banks, whereas the private banks and the foreign banks comparatively, they are doing well. So maybe there can be many reasons, there can be many arguments for this, in favor, against that, but this is the data which is speaking a lot, that within the 10 years, from a growth of 25%, within 10 years, we could not foresee the market, we could not strengthen our monitoring system, we could not strengthen our recovery system, and as such we met with an fate which brought us to almost at the zero level. So moving forward, this is giving one very good lesson, and that is the pro-cyclicality studies shows that NPA tend to increase when the lending in the economy is growing. So my dear friends, at the policy level, whenever the economy is growing, we have to see whether the economic growth, whether it is sustainable or not sustainable. Though it is a very high decision, very tough decision for anyone to decide the future. Same thing we are facing right now also, but with the experience, with certain judgments, for example, the private sector banks, for example, the foreign banks, they kept themselves away from all these things. There may be some arguments that there are certain compulsions as far as the public sector banks are concerned, because when the economy is growing and the fund has to be flowed in the infrastructures, I can understand this. Absolutely, there is no, basically, but I fail to understand many products which were brought in the system, and such exotic products like the lease rental receivables, which were given against the security of the property, with this assumption that the value of the property will never come down, and at the same time the economy will be performing in this way, and all that things now are creating a pressure on the system. So we have to be very, very calculative whenever such a trend we are observing, and perhaps this is the basic idea behind the Basel III also, when they have introduced the pro-cyclic buffer. The pro-cyclic buffer introduced during 2010 and 2011 by the Basel III, that was the time when the Indian economy was having this situation. So that was basically aimed at this: when the economy is growing, there is a normal tendency by the bankers to build their assets which are not very highly rated, very prudent, and it's quite possible that when the downturn will come, they will be becoming impaired, and that is proved also. So apart from that, what is the other reasons which can be attributed, and the causes which can be attributed for such a performance? So while the economy slowdown affect the debt repayment capability of the corporate borrowers, but at the same time, there is an insufficient pre-sanctioned due diligence and inadequate portfolio monitoring. Also allow the borrowers to divert fund to the unrelated activities and siphon money, resulting in defaults. Last two things, borrow to divert funds, particularly the corporates, and unrelated activity and siphoning money, I feel most of us basically collectively collapsed to arrest this particular activity, and we were not having any technology. It was left at the lowest level to monitor the accounts, and collectively the system collapsed. So this where we are at 2013. So now how to move forward? So now moving forward, or what went wrong. Loans made in 2008, I have seen the portfolios. I have visited the Reserve Bank of India, are having a lot of data, and there the infrastructure projects which came during 2006, 2007, and 2008, they were completed in time. There, at that was a time when there was a rapid deposit growth also. Banks were lavished with the liquidity, and all these things extrapolate past growth to the performance of future. The people thought that since there will be a similar performance, and without analyzing whether the economy will be in position to absorb this type of the funding, absorb this type of the growth, or there will be a sufficient demand, and there will be a factor which will be basically leading to that growth without visualizing. So they keep on funding all such projects. So which lead to increase in the risk appetite. I still remember the many proposals which were coming of the infrastructure projects. It was a comparatively a new sector. It was emerging. We were not having the data how this sector will be performing, but still the promoters' contribution was 15%, 20%. In certain cases, it was 10% also at a throwaway prices, interest rates, which we were not giving even to the best of the MSMEs. We were giving to the new infrastructure project because a lot of competition was there. I still remember, I have come across many cases where established parties of the road projects, when they were coming and the project has been established at that point of time, in between, I don't mind in naming the banks also, IDFC, ILFS, they were jumping in, and then they were basically spoiling the market, and immediately the customers, they were switching over on 0.5 basis interest rate, on 0.75 basis interest rate, and they were finding basically is as a very big issue. So it led to the increase in the risk appetite. Everybody was looking for the 20% growth, 25% growth, and they were sacrificing with the quality of the assets. And this was highly leveraged and the less promoter equity. These are all basically issues which went wrong at the policy level. Now, when we are coming to the credit monitoring, what exactly we mean by credit monitoring? We are very clear in our mind what is credit monitoring. This has to be done at the portfolio level. This has to be done at the customer level. This has to be done at the transaction level. When we are talking about the portfolio level, continuously we should see how a particular segment is behaving, how old this segment is, whether we are having a sufficient data of the behavior of that segment, how the industry is behaving, whether in future, what will be its contribution in the GDP, what is the portfolio of the retail loans, though it is a sustainable sector, but still, whether we are more moving towards the mortgage loans only and basically avoiding few others and small borrowers and agriculture. So continuously, basically monitoring of this portfolio, that is a requirement and the need of the time. So at the customer level, whether the customers physical as well as the financial. On the financial, I would like to say that I came across almost about 20 years back, one incident by a very senior banker who recently retired as an ED from leading public sector bank. He shared in a class that a customer to him often was asking ad hoc, and all the time he was under stress. So when they came across their balance sheet, and when he submitted the balance sheet for the review, what they found that he is showing excellent profit. And then he could have some doubt that whether these financials are original or whether they are fabricated. So he asked someone to go to the registrar of companies and try to find what the balance sheet he has submitted with the registrar of company. When the actual balance sheet in the registrar of company, that was tracked and taken, and it was full of the losses. So there are qualitative aspects and there are quantitative aspects. Many a times at the micro level or even at the corporate level also, whenever we are analyzing the financials, we are basically avoiding and overlooking certain qualitative aspects. When a particular company in a particular sector, when the sector is not behaving properly, how it is that in the case of the steel, a particular company which is a very new, and they are coming and they are making all sort of claims that they will be having this much sales, this much sales, this much sales, and where they will be bidding with whom? Steel Authority of India. They will be bidding with whom? Tata Steels. And then the Bhushan Steel was given to the tune of 80,000 crores of rupees, where the Steel Authority of India, their total debt was about 21,000 crore of rupees, and the ISCO Tata Steel, they were having 24,000 crore, and how they will be bidding. These are certain qualitative aspects which should have been looked into at the customer level also. Then there are certain transaction level, the diversion of funds. There are few best practices which is existing in the system also, among the banks also. One of the best practices which I have come across during few sessions, that is by the ICICI. ICICI, at the time of opening any corporate account, what they are doing, they are taking the all details of the group companies also. When they are taking the details of all group companies, so at that point of time, every day at the end of their operations, they are running a software and they are generating certain alerts wherever they are finding 5 lakh rupees and above. In case any of the corporate has transferred that amount to the company, group company, so immediately alert is generated and it's went to the concerned person who is responsible for this, and thereafter he has to find out whether it was a genuine or whether it is a diversion. So to that extent, the technology is used to find out, and many such more things are there. And in case of the financials, I came across one balance sheets, I will not name the company, and when I found that on the asset side, there is only tangible assets are 19,000 crore, whereas the total debt and the other resources with the companies on the liability side, they are 43,000 crore. So immediately it stuck to my mind where 24,000 crore has come. And that 24,000 crore was invested in certain other projects. So when we asked the consortium, since it was a new account to us, when we asked the consortium whether this necessary permission for the investing in the other group companies or in the another project has been taken, there was no answer because it was a name lending. So that was the era where a lot of name lending has taken place, and we thought that whether it was a airline case or whether it was a steel case or whether it was a steel sector or whether it was power sectors, most of the cases it was a name lending, and due diligence as far as the sanctions were concerned and that was the proposals were concerned, that was not done. So coming to few other things which can be used at the macro level, I am of a very firm opinion that we should act the code 70-20-10. This is very close to my heart. Okay. Now most of our branches, they are dealing in the MSME portfolio, because in last 3-4 years there has been a thrust in the MSME portfolio. And when we are talking about the MSME portfolio, there is a large borrowers, and in case if there is large borrowers, how basically the monitoring should take place. So we created a category 70-20-10, which says that 70% of the borrowers, normally it is a behavior, they will be paying in time. 20% are such borrowers, they take some time, maybe 5 days, 10 days or 15 days, with 1 or 2 reminders over telephone, they will be repaying the payment. But the rest 10%, they are basically the basic issue as far as the stress asset management is concerned. That is the 10% should be on the watch list. Any person who is as a cluster head, branch head, or even at a corporate head, depending upon what is the size of the portfolio, they should create a watch list. And in that watch list, one is created. So then you will come to know what are the trouble accounts. So when you are having a list of the trouble account, according to me, one should not feel nervous. One should not be very aggressive also in approaching the customer. Prior to that, there are certain things that should be done at their level. And one of that thing is documentation verification. Because please note to all my young participants who are in the audience that credit default per se is not a crime. That means in case if there is a default of credit, I cannot go to the police station and lodge FIR. I can only go to the court and file my claim against the borrower, right? So for that purpose, in case if I want that the claim should be settled and the claim should be entertained by the court, document should be in the perfect order. So very first thing in the case after preparing the watch list is the documentation verification. So after the document verification, please try to see what is the value of the assets and whether we have done the asset valuation, whether we are having the collaterals, whether we are having the plant machine, what is their life, whether life is short. So the action should be immediate. In case if the asset life is some time, so then we should take some time, and then the asset verification whether the assets are existing or not. And this asset existence of this asset is more required in the case of where there are working capital against the book debts. In the most of the fraudulent cases we have seen, the list of the book debts that is provided to the banks, they are not having any idea whether that the book debts are giving or not, but they are allowing the drawing powers. And when the ultimately account is failed, and at that point of time when we are moving, so at that point of time we find that the assets are not existing. In many cases we have seen, as far as the tangible assets are concerned, same thing is happening. And then once it is done, so thereafter you should approach to the customer, you should approach to the defaulter and then start negotiating. And for that you have to prepare a resolution plan. And then there is a 3R concept. This 3R concept I will be discussing in detail in the following slides. So credit monitoring tools, we should be having data on SMA. Having the data on SMA is not sufficient. Most of the officers during my various classes and the lectures, when I am interacting with them, all of them, they are saying, sir, we are tracking this weekly basis, fortnightly basis, or whatever the periodicity is set by the particular bank. But this is not sufficient. Once the data is with you, you must know what you have to do with this data. It may not happen that you are only following up for repayment. You please decide if whether what is the intention of the borrower, whether there is a genuine reason for not making the payment, or whether it is a willful defaulter, and how basically you have to take, how quickly you have to take the action on this. In this case, I will be basically mentioning the 2 best practices which is existing in the system. That is, one is of the HDFC Bank and other is in the public sector, Indian Bank. I have studied the system of both the cases, although the various banks, they are having their own stress asset management branches. But as far as the HDFC is concerned, I feel that one should take a lesson from that bank. And in the public sector, I think the Indian Bank that is having the best practice. What the practices Indian Bank is following? Indian Bank best practices is that every day, all the branches of their bank, they are drawing this list, even if the account is overdue for a day. This is not because of the SMA. Before the implementation, they have SMA. They have started doing this. And first day, they will be contacting the defaulter on the telephone. And thereafter, after 7 days, in case if the money is not coming, they will be sending the people at their house, at their door for the physical contact. And then in case if the 30 days are going and still there is no money, immediately a legal notice will be issued, irrespective of waiting for the 90 days. So in the case of the HDFC now, what I have understood from that system, immediately when the accounts, they are becoming in the category of the SMA 0 consistently or SMA 1, so all the portfolio that is shifted to their stress cell, and about 30 to 35 accounts are given to that particular cell, and that cell basically one by one that will be analyzing the portfolio, and then they will be deciding out of these 35 accounts how many are to be retained and how many are to be contacted and how many are to be marked for the legal recourse. So they are not waiting even for the 90 days. Immediately they will be starting doing the action on that. So data as such is not sufficient, because the data creation is now a technical ability which all the banks they are having. but how to act on that data, that is very, very important. Then stock and book debt audit. This is something which we are not taking seriously. Maybe possible in certain cases, even auditors may not be taking seriously. So this is something which we should take it very, very seriously, particularly in the case of the book debt audit. 100 crore of rupees, they have emerged as a fraudulent when the forensic audit was done after the account was NPA. Why the forensic audit was done? Because it was a regulatory requirement. Prior to that, nobody thought of doing these things. Then monthly monitoring reports, credit audit and guidelines, concurrent auditors for the large borrower accounts, what is the credit ratings, internal inspection. Most of these things basically we discussed in our last session last week, and a video of that is available on our website. So one can go through in detail, and then the market reports, and then there should be a exit policy for the high risk borrower. We tried a lot for framing a exit policy for the high risk borrowers, but the issue is that the market, when we are going for a takeoff accounts, so takeoff accounts, mostly the market is totally dry. Nobody is there in the market. So the only thing which is matter in this matter is the first mover. How fast and how quickly you do the follow-up for the recovery without waiting the account become NPA or for 70 days or 80 days, but waiting till that, immediately from the next day in case if you start following up, so the results, they are very, very encouraging. So for monitoring the portfolio, the question is, are we investing adequately in information about the market conditions? Are we having the sufficient industry study reports? Are there sectoral study reports are there? What is the source of reports, from where the reports are coming? And whether we are fixing risk appetite for the sensitive sectors, or we are aggressively still financing to the NBFCs without knowing how they are performing, what the purpose is the performing, whether they will be taking the money from us and repaying their bond money or the loan, what we have seen recently in many other cases, right? So even if you have obtained all this report at certain level, whether all reports are shared with the concerned people, those who are doing the monitoring and they are responsible for the monitoring, or these reports are just for the namesake. These are certain issues which I feel at the policy level and in the system, they are very, very important. And in order to improve the system, so we should be very active on this side also. So post sanction monitoring credit audit, so legal enforcement of the documents obtained, this is very important. Compliance of various terms and conditions, timelines for the credit audit. So whenever we are giving the credit, so this is more basically from the point of view of the public sector space. And in the case of the private sectors, in the foreign banks, they are having their own mechanism to address all these things. And in case if we are having, so all the recovery cells and the monitoring cells, they should look into from the policy level and try to strengthen the system. And they have to be very strict as far as this credit audit is concerned. So let me see immediately after taking from where I have started. Now, since we are coming almost to the last leg of this session, so we have started with the statement of the governor, and where he has expressed his concern about the recovery. So immediately after his coming, what are the various steps which has been taken? The 2-3 steps which are still existing, they are, I think they are very, very commendable. First of all, creation of a central repository of the large common exposures across the banks. There was a asymmetric information among the consortium banks, among the multiple banks. They were not sharing the informations, and the big borrowers, they were always exploiting these situations. They were dealing with one particular bank and keeping their account basically standard in that bank, and they were not bothered about the remaining banks whether the account is NPA or not. And when we were approaching to the active banks, they were not disclosing the information in full. So very first thing, all of you may be surprised and many of you may be knowing that the Dr. Rajan, he on 4th of September, he joined RBI, and on 11th September, these guidelines and these instructions were issued by the Reserve Bank of India. So within this 7 days, this issues, and this is basically an information system which is still prevailing. And there are number of other systems. For example, the framework of revitalizing distressed assets in the economy. In this, two things, they were very, very important: SMA 0, SMA 01, and SMA 02, and the corrective action plan. Now, most of you may be surprised to know that this SMA in India came into existence in February 2002. February 2002. And these guidelines came, this was also issued by Reserve Bank of India. These guidelines, again, as a part of this circular on the revitalizing distressed assets, it was contained SMA 0, SMA, these categories. Between 2002 to 2014, nobody has taken the cognizance of this SMA. And whereas at that time, 2002, I was in the Middle East, and there the banks, they started following this SMA. And they not following the SMA, they started providing the provision of the SMA. And I remember that as against the standard accounts in that particular country, the provision was 25, and for the all SMA account, the provision was 5%. So we have been basically very apathetic in all these issues. Neither the regulators, they basically followed with the banks to follow, and nor banks there at their level, they found this, and the result was a complete disaster. And then there was a number of schemes, they were introduced in between. In the span of 2 years, all these schemes were tested on the floor. Many of them, they have not worked. So as such, in June 2019 and in between, the framework for resolution for the stress asset, they came and they have withdrawn all these schemes, but SMA 0 and the CRILIC is still existing, and the corrective action plan in the form of the resolution plan is still existing. In between, the RBI also undertook this asset quality review in 2015. And due to this asset quality review, all that accounts which were considered as a stress accounts and they were under the carpet, they came out. And as a result, whatever the jump we have seen of the gross NPAs in the years 16, 17 and 18, which is matching to the 1996 figure, it is only because of the asset quality review. And had that not been done, right now the position may be having more worse than what was there in 1996. So these are the various initiatives which is taken by the Reserve Bank of India within a period of 2014 to 2016. So what is the early identification of stress for the loan accounts? The early loan account stress, they are SMA 0, and this is now, initially it was not defined, it was left to the banks, but now it is defined in the case of the loan, even if the account is for 1 day overdue, so then it will be marked as a SMA 0, and up to 30 days it will be considered as a SMA 0. So then there is SMA 1, 31 to 16 days. I think I need not to tell all these things. Most of us are aware. Even the young officers, those who are there in the branches, they are also aware what is SMA 1, SMA 2. So this is basically a system which has evolved in last 5-6 years and is doing well. But the issue will always remain that whatever the information we are extracting through this MIS and through the statements, how proactively we are working on that, how proactively we are planning our portfolios, what type of the industry we are avoiding, whether we have basically marked certain industries where we will be very, appetite will be very low. Still, are we continuing with the same thing that in case if there is an emerging sector, our appetite will be very low and we will not be very bullish in the sense that we will be aggressive to build our portfolio. And again, that I have seen still that thing is persisting. Last year, the Reserve Bank of India came with one product, and that product was for the infrastructure trusts. And Reserve Bank of India allowed the lending, and the banks, they have now framing the policy to lend up to 20 years. It is basically amazing how whether your asset liability management or the statement, they allow you to fund any project for 20 years. Whether you know any project we are funding, what is the life of that project? even if that project is having a life of 20 years or 25 years. No one is basically investing even the bonds for the 20 years, and the banks, they are framing their policy, and where they are proposing as a part of the policy that the loans will be given for the 20 years without having the funds for that. When you go the liability side, the portfolio of the banks, you will be finding that the most of the funding is done by the deposits, where the duration is not 3 years, 4 years even. And when the bonds are there, bonds are very, very limited, even 5% or 4% of the total liabilities. And with that, in case if they feel that they will be funding infrastructure also, they will be funding such bonds also, and they will be sending. RBI is basically giving a leeway to all of you to look into this sector, but it is not that you follow what the RBI is saying. You should see basically what are your strengths and whether your internals, they allow you to do this type of the products or not. What the mistake we have done in 2010 or 2011 at the time of infrastructure, whether we should also repeat the same, basically because we have to grow and we have to show the performance. I think this is something which we should ponder collectively and try to save the system. So when we are coming to the revolving credit like cash credit or the overdraft limits, as far as the SMA 0 is, it is not applicable in the new framework. SMA 0 is 31 to 60 days and SMA 2 is 61 to 90 days. So again, in this case, apart from the SMA, there are other many qualitative points and the factors are there which can guide you to know before the account become SMA whether it is under stress or not. When I am talking about many concurrent auditors, and I am getting a feel that whenever any cash credit account is always utilized above 90% or almost touching 100%, so that should be under your watch list. Preparing a watch list of your customer is very, very important aspect, and not at the branch level or at the cluster level, it should be at the corporate level also. Then there should be some mechanism should be evolved by which you must know in the revolving credits how many companies, they are always completely utilizing their working capital limits. And in case if they are utilizing the working capital limits, so in order to draw the DP, whether book debts they are increasing or whether the book debts they are stable, whether the stocks that is decreasing or whether the stock, what is the nature of the stock and may not be obsolete stock. This is all very fundamental in the foundation of the monitoring which we are forgetting. And I think we should come back to the fundamentals in case if we have to strengthen the system. So moving further, corrective action plan, always I see this is consisting of 3 R's. This is rectification, 1, restructuring, 2, recovery, 3. This is allowed under the new framework also, under the resolution plan. Any account which is under your watch list or you feel this is giving a stress, and when you are approaching to the customer and you are analyzing their financials, first of all you have to see whether the problem is of the short-term nature or whether the problem which is the long-term nature. If it is of the short-term nature, I feel some hand holdings should be allowed in order to rectify that problem, and some space should be given to the customer without compromising with the pricing, without compromising or sacrificing any revenue. So in case if the account can become performing, so this is the best method which is not costing much to the banks. When it comes to the restructuring, again, if we feel that it is not a problem which will be in the short terms, because right now under the COVID-19, whatever we are looking, I think most of the accounts, they will be coming under the restructuring, because we have to see all that accounts which has been performing for last 4 to 5 years, and because of this lockdowns and other the factors, economic slowdown globally. So in case if they are under the pressure, so some restructuring should be allowed. And then when we are doing the restructuring, the main tool is to find whether this unit is going to be viable or not. And for the viability study, all of us, we know that the tool which we have to use, that is the DSCR. Projected cash flows, they will be playing very important role. Again, it should not be exercised which is done as a quantitative exercise. It should be a qualitative exercise. It should be related with understanding the full business of the borrower. It should be with some basically sensitivity on the downside. And then in case if you feel the viability is existing and within the policy which your bank is allowing, so within that, in case if you allow the concessions to the borrower and make the account viable, so that is the another option which is very healthy. So when we are coming to the recovery, when both these tools fail, the rectification also and the restructuring also, so then we are not left with any options but to the recovery. Again, in the case of the recovery, we will see whether it is the non-legal or it is the legal. When we are talking about the non-legal, that can be a one-time compromise proposals also. That can be sale of asset to the asset recovery companies also. That can be a change of the management also. There can be a lot of the actions can be taken under this non-legal. But I feel any recovery system cannot be sufficient or operationally very sound unless the system or the economy is having a very sound legal system. And this thing we have observed also. Since 2004, under the SARFAESI, whatever basically the loan against the properties or the loan against the tangible asset has taken place, the impairment in all that asset has been very, very low. Recovery has been very high. And that is a message is going to the borrowers also. That is a message going to the system also. After all, India is an emerging economy. We just cannot take a stand that the fund will not be flowing in the system. Fund will be flowing in the system. This is an economy which will be growing only by debt. It cannot grow. We know that we are having our limitation as far as the equity is concerned. As the other sources from the markets are concerned, whether it is a capital market or whether it is a private investment, we are having constraints. We know this very well. So that will be the basically pushing the economy and building the assets. And for that, we should have a very, very sound legal system. So since the sound legal system SARFAESI and thereafter, as in the 2014-15, all the regulatory measures which were taken in the number of whether it was SDR, whether it was a 4SA or whether it was 5 into 25 and all other things, why they failed? Basically because the legal system was not supportive. But with the introduction in August 2016 of the IBC code, the thing has changed completely. Now the borrowers, where the banks, they were running after the borrowers, now the borrowers, they are coming to the banks and want to settle the accounts on the table. They know in case if they will not be doing that, and then they will be losing the company, they will be losing the total assets. And that will be maybe at the throwaway price, because to basically create a momentum in this, initially the Reserve Bank of India, they directed the banks to go for 12 top accounts which were constituting at that point of time almost 50% of the total gross NPAs and the stress assets, something amount, if I remember correctly, about 4.5 lakh crores of rupees. So IBC is now in a evolving stage. Slowly it is taking up, and I am very, very sure, and maybe it will be helping a lot in improving the system. But at the same time, it is also our responsibility whenever we are acquiring an asset or giving the advance. So we should be very thorough in the all pre-sanctions and in all the recovery mechanisms and in all the monetary mechanisms also, and we act fast. So only then the legal system also will be effective, and it may not happen because of our laxity. Lot of the accounts, they are going to the IBC and there is no taker of these accounts in the market, and then again we are left only with the residual value, which is almost 10 to 15% of our outstandings. So that situation we should avoid. So moving next, the stress asset management. We are finding that sometimes borrowers find themselves in the financial difficulty because of the factors beyond their control, and also due to the managerial deficiencies, we should be very supportive in such cases, and all that should be not seen with the same parameter spectrum. So for the revival of the viable entities as well as for the safest of the money lent by the banks, timely support is very, very important. It may not happen that the undue time is taken and unnecessary we are killing a very viable proposal also. So objective of the restructuring is to preserve the value of the viable entities that are affected by the certain internal and the external factors. May be possible some sacrifices required by the lenders, but in case if you feel the intentions are genuine, project is having a viability in the future, outlook is bright and outlook is positive, or even if it is a stable, we should support the restructuring tool also. This is something where we are also lacking. We are not doing the full use of the credit information companies. As per one survey, only 19.8% of the adult population in the space of the retail portfolio. Whenever, whether it is a CIBIL or whether it is a three other information companies, so as against the 100% in the several countries, and I am also having a study which is shared by the CIBIL people only, that all those banks which are having a continuously interacting with the CIC, the CIBIL, then there the impairment rate and the delinquency rate is very low as compared to the banks, those who are not basically taking these services. So this is another aspect we should take into account apart from the other things. So this is something, again a statement of the Dr. Raghuram Rajan, which I like very much, and where he says the debt contract is one where a borrower, be it a small farmer or the promoter of a large petrochemical plant, raise money with the promise to repay with the interest and principal according to a specified schedule. If the borrower cannot meet his promise, he is in default. In the standard debt contract through the course of history and across the world, default means the borrower has to make substantial sacrifices. On the contrary, we see the borrower is not making any sacrifice, and sacrifice is all done by the banks. So with the IBC, we should use this tool and try to see where the borrowers, they are not ready to do any sacrifice, at least such account, they should be taught a lesson and immediately the legal action should be done. So should not be a very sympathetic attitude towards such borrowers due to any reasons, but this is a very sound statement, and due to this, points are as per the latest guidelines of the prudential framework for the resolution of the stress assets, which is issued by the Reserve Bank of India in July 2019. And under this guidelines, all the other previous guidelines, they have been withdrawn. And as per these guidelines, all the banks, they are required to early identification and reporting of the stress. Then they have to implementation of the resolution plan within a limited period. Within the 30 days, they have to basically decide whether they want a resolution plan or not. Once it is, the decision is taken, whether it is a consortium or the multiple account, within 180 days, the resolution should be done. And in case if it is not done, so then some concessions are given. And then there are certain implementation conditions for the resolution plan. It is a binding on all the lenders of the consortium or the multiple banking in case if this resolution plan is approved by 75% in value and 60% in number, and that will be binding on even those who are not supporting this plan. And then they have to go for the inter-corporate agreement, and everything will be abided by that. And there are certain penalty disincentives to the banks in case if there is a delay implementation of the resolution plan. Instead of the 20% provisions, all the such accounts which are marked for the resolution plan, they will be subject to 35% provisioning even at the initial stage also. So this is the recent guidelines, regulatory guidelines, which is mandatory in nature. So all the banks, they are required to follow. And RBI has given certain concession in the COVID-19, as I told you. In the history of 25 years data, whatever we have seen, there has been a cyclic trend, and that cyclic trend is much matching with the economic growth. Wherever the economic growth was very rapid and very robust, in such cases we have seen that the NPA or the stress assets, they were manageable. Moment the downturn has taken place, all of a sudden the impairment of the assets and the stress assets, they came on the surface, and they are putting a lot of pressure on the system. So in the COVID-19, this is a situation which no one has seen globally, and maybe in 1929 or during that period, this might have been seen. So how to counter this situation, nobody knows. So as a regulators, Reserve Bank of India, they first gave the concession for first 3 months from March 1 to up to the 31st of May, and now again from June 1 to 2020 August 3rd, they have all extended the moratorium period. So during this period, whatever the outstanding repayment is due, that will be extended automatically for the next 5-6 months, and in future may be possible in case if this is extended further, God forbid it should not, and some relief may come, so it may be further extended. So nobody is aware how the things will take shape, but definitely the situation will not be very bright in times to come. At least we may be continuing with this stress for another 1-2 years. Whatever the situation, by September 2019, the system has come to, gradually we were moving for a betterment. Gradually the hope was there, and we were finding some trends which we have seen in 98, 99, 2000 downward, and then coming to the low, and then the economy is also picking up, and government is also aiming for the 5 trillion economy, and lot of credit requirement will be there in the market. But with all the stresses, there may be a constant and challenges. Let us see how the system will take care of that. Accordingly, the repayment schedule and all subsequent due dates are postponed. And there is a deferment of interest also in the case of the working capital facilities. Although I think no ad hoc has been allowed. I am not aware in case if there is any recent guidelines on that or not. But for the interest, the deferment on the same lines which has been done. And with this, I conclude, and still we are having about 10 to 12 minutes on this, and I know that many of you may be looking for adding your perspective. I know many senior bankers, they are attending this webinar, and many other industries and the academic space people are there. So I am stopping here my PPT, and I would like to have the views and the questions from the audience.
I think, Professor Mahajan, we can take the questions on the chat box.
Okay.
I am reading it out, and
Okay.
you can answer them.
So
And if time permits, we shall definitely take the views of senior bankers who are present
Okay, sir.
here.
Okay.
First question is from Mr. Ramesh Subramaniam. He is saying, what is the mechanism banks have for monitoring the borrowers who are sanctioned loans for constructions outside India? For example, Zoom developers in European countries. The loan of rupees 2,200 crores zoomed away. What is your opinion on that?
Normally, outside India, whatever the loan we are giving, that we are giving by way of external commercial borrowing. So external commercial borrowing, as such, Indian banks, they are not participating. This is done by the foreign banks or the Indian banks, those who are having the entities outside India, and for lending outside India, that is not done by the Indian banks. So it will basically is the responsibility of all those banks, those who have extended the loans outside India by that banks only. And in case if it is done by the Indian banks, so Indian banks, they are appointing their some agents for the monitoring this account, their documents, and all this is done by certain trustship which is engaged, and with the help of that, these accounts are monitored. And of course, the MIS, these Indian banks, they will be asking from time to time. But this is given by to the agencies which are there outside India.
Okay, now second question from Mr. Subramaniam again. Heyman Minsky stated economic stability breeds instability. He also states there are three types of financing: hedge financing, speculative financing, and Ponzi financing, or cash flow neither covers principal nor interest. The best if the first one. Have we reached the third stage? Very brief answer, Mr. Professor Mahajan.
Sir, we have not at the third stage as far as the RBI is concerned, but as far as the practice is concerned, I cannot rule out the speculation. That means name lending. So it is not speculative financing, but it is a name lending. Definitely financing is there where due diligence, much due diligence in the past has not been seen as such. We have seen that distance.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Amitabh Vakil. He says, do you think that unethical business practices is major reason for increasing NPA in banks?
This is when the economy is at the rapid growing stage. I have seen many unethical practices, they happened. I have experience for that, but that is particular that period when there is a rapid growth. But when the downturn is there, normally such a situation, everybody become wise, and during the rapid growth period, they all forget the past very short memories. So unethical, definitely they exist, but at certain period.
Okay. There is a observation from Mr. Kashi Khandelwal. He is a chartered accountant. This is why Institute of Chartered Accountants of India introduces during 2019 generation of UDIN, so that control on preparing such different financial statements for different authorities. My question will be, has it improved what you have said? The two accounts were presented, one was with Register of Companies and one before the banks. Yes, Professor Mahajan.
Sir, I will not be able to answer this question because recently I am not in touch with this type of the practices. So anyone in the audience, in case if they will be able to answer this, so I think
Mr. Khandelwal, you can unmute your mic and you can answer this.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya. And I have been very carefully listening. The presentation has been exceedingly well. Why I mentioned this particular instance was given by Professor Shah, that ROC filing was different, whereas the presentation to the bank for other purposes financing was different. All these things we have also come through when I was in the Central Council of ICI also, and how to keep it track. This UDIN system was generated, and I would be happy to place on record that huge number of cases, because supposedly I have signed a particular account as an auditor, and incidentally filing in the ROC records or income tax records, different records are there. This one UDIN number what has been generated, that can reveal what was the original document what I have signed. Other than this, if any other document is there, whether it is any of the bank, whether it is the income tax department, whether it is the ROC or any financial institution or government authority, that would prove on record that these are the fictitious or false documents, and the original and the genuine document is where this UDIN is generated, and this is an open document record where institute filing and everywhere it is there. So this is why I suggested, I just advise, maybe the bankers should also come into this particular field, that whenever such type of things are there, the duly UDIN number accounts, UDIN number signed account copy would be sufficient enough to prove it on record what is the genuineness duly certified by the auditor. Whether within the audited, if there is something different, this is different. But two different types of accounts and financial statements, would be a matter of ruled out situation. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khandelwal. Next question is from Anand Bharadwaj Sharma. He says, fringe divine borrowers are sometimes that have always existed in the system. But what is important is that post-COVID, another 10 to 12 lakh crores are expected to be added on the system. What is your view? Is the recourse available in the existing system, or maybe any new enabler that can be considered as a worthy way to rescue the industry? If you have answered, Professor Mahajan, you can answer, because COVID-19, no one knows what kind of uncertainty will be there and continue.
I would like to just have my own views. I feel that 10 to 20 lakh figure, okay, we will not go to the figure, but definitely there will be some increase. Right now it is 10 lakh crore of rupees, and it may go to 15 lakh or 20 lakh. Yes, two things will be there. Those sectors which are under stress and for recovery, like automobiles and like steel, they may take some time. So now it will be up to the RBI up to what time they are allowing the restructuring. I feel in these circumstances, restructuring should be according to the sector in which a particular borrower is belonging. It should not be across the board to all the borrowers. So that will be very killing. Maybe possible that in the pharmaceutical, recovery may take place within the next 6 months. So in case if the pharmaceutical, you are giving the restructuring, so then it should be for a very short period. And in case if you are giving the restructuring to the certain companies which are belonging to the sectors which are really feeling the heat, in that case, RBI can look into for a longer period. So that perhaps may save some provisioning and some impairment in the system. This is my.
Okay,
This is
Mr.
my.
Subramaniam has another question.
Yeah.
To what extent RBI inspecting officers and Department of Banking Supervision are responsible for huge stress asset in banking system? Only after Governor Rajan ordered for an asset quality review, many greens became dark and debts. It seemed the inspecting officers were clueless. What do you think about it?
I think not only the RBI people, collectively, everyone is responsible in the system. It is not, it may be possible that RBI auditors, they are reviewing the assets within the own parameters and at which is prevailing at that particular period of time. So they cannot go beyond their jurisdictions many a times, right? So it is basically the system as a whole is responsible, not a particular sector. Yes, I definitely say that the Governor Rajan, he has taken a lead. He brought many new things in order to improve the efficiency and the operations in the recovery mechanism. So that is commendable. And now onward also, when the people are coming from the RBI for the inspection, need not be that they will be able to detect and timely, because it will be very difficult and very subjective when we are discussing with them about the impairment and all these things. So it is, I feel that no one should be blamed, it's the whole system which is to be blamed.
Okay, there is another statement from Mr. C.A. Kashi Khandelwal. He says, in view of such detailed information shared by the learned professor, what is his views on your PM's call of 5 trillion economy?
As I have told you, in case if we are looking for the 5 trillion economy by 2024, 2025, so definitely for the development purpose, whatever the gaps are there in the economy, to achieve this thing, it will be coming from the debt and in the Indian economy, because we are having a track record and our the stock markets are not that robust that they can provide this money either by way of the bonds, capital bonds, or by way of the equity. So that has come to the by debt only, and for that purpose the financial system, both NBFCs and the banks, they have to be strengthened. So as of now, and due to the COVID-19, it looks very optimistic, these targets, but since the government is doing, so maybe possible that they are having something in the mind.
Okay, there is another question from C.A. Kashi Khandelwal. Not to deal politely with default borrowers to the extent you have suggested, but whether permissible under law.
Yeah, whatever is permissible under law, that should be done. Basically, because there will be a two category of the borrowers. One category is that there is a genuine default, and in case if the genuine default is not there, but there is no resolution plan also for the revival. So in that case, there is nothing but the insolvency has to be declared. But in case if the borrower is fraudulent, I am always of the opinion that that should be dealt very strictly, very strictly. So it all depends upon the case-to-case basis, what the actions to be taken.
Okay, there is a question from Mr. Mihir M. He says, does IRAC norms relating to credit in accounts applicable for agricultural loans? Like, would it be linked to crop cycle? So accordingly, recovery cycle would be triggered credit in account for 90 days. Yes, Professor Mahajan.
I am not very clear on this question also.
Mr. Mihir, you can unmute your mic and you can ask the question.
I would like to understand what is the question.
Sir, thank you. The session was very wonderful. I was listening quite carefully. So very in-depth knowledge. So hats off. My question is IRAC norms. It says that, credit in the accounts, no credit in the accounts for more than 90 days. It will start moving into a NPA category. Now, and then subsequent section says that, for agricultural cases, it would follow a crop cycle. So this particular norm, no credit in the account for 90 days, will it be applicable for agricultural cases, or it is not going to be applicable? Because the recovery would start accordingly.
I think in the guidelines which are issued in the May by the RBI, they have included the agriculture also.
Okay, Mr. Qureshi, you have
It is
question.
23rd May, a circular, in case if you see, that is very clear. It is.
Yes, Professor Mahajan, continue.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Continue, Professor Mahajan.
Which question, sir? Now, I am over
Same
with that.
agriculture.
Agriculture, I have told it is a May 23rd circular,
Okay.
and in that circular it is included.
Okay, there is no more
And,
question. One
this is,
question to organizer.
Just to add, this is Ashwini Sharma. In agriculture loans, the IRAC norms are very well there, but in those cases, the due date itself is set as per the crop pattern. So 90 days starts from the crop due date, and due date is set with the crop pattern. So it is very much applicable.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for the clarification. There is a question to organizer that what is the timing for tomorrow's session? I must say the session is over now at 8:30. There is no session tomorrow, and it closes today. Mr. Qureshi, the question was from Mr. Qureshi. And thank you. If any of the senior banker want to make a comment, very brief comment, they can raise their hand and or in the chat box they can write.